Joe, how are you?
I'm so good. I'm really excited to be here.
Can you tell us the difference? What is a psychotherapist and then like a therapist and then like a psychiatrist? Like what's the levels?
Right. Oh my gosh. It's actually so confusing, but I think I can do it. So there's psychologists. Now, some psychologists are clinical. So that means they're concerned with like mental health and therapy and all sorts of stuff that we're going to be talking about today. But then some psychologists, it's like you're a social psychologist or a political psychologist or a whatever kind of fill in the blank psychologist. And they do research. They're still psychologists, but it's like, like who's one that I could think of? Like, do you know like Steven Pinker at Harvard? Like he's written a bunch of famous books, or like Jonathan Haidt, for example. Like they're social psychologists.
So maybe like a political psychologist would be studying like why people like are Trump supporters or why people go from one party to another.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And so then you have, so clinical psychologists are closer to psychotherapists. And that's what I identify as. I am trained as a clinical counselor, but there are some counselors that are like school counselors, you know, and they don't necessarily have the clinical training that I have. Same with social workers, right? So you can have a licensed clinical social worker, but then some social workers aren't doing therapy. They're like out like in neighborhoods helping people navigate like the system for whoever they're helping, right? And so as long as it's clinical, it's psychotherapy. Therapy itself isn't actually like a protected term. So if you think about it like cryotherapy, massage therapy, it's just like too broad, right? So psychotherapy is what we mean by like mental health counseling.
And so if you're a psychotherapist, okay, so wait. Can you just give us like a therapy for dummies, like hierarchy of like the categories?
It would be difficult to give a hierarchy just because I think the different labels between psychologist, counselor, social worker, and then psychiatrist, we all have different strengths. So like, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know that much about medication. I collaborate with them. You know, I know some basics, but I'm not actually allowed to like prescribe you any
So
pills.
who's the ones that prescribe meds?
Psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist prescribes a med and a psychologist doesn't prescribe a med.
Exactly. And psychologists, depending on how they're trained, sometimes they're like me. They're all about like being in therapy and talking with you. But then some of them, even if they're clinical, they don't even do that. They just give tests. So if you have like a little kid and you're wondering, you know, are they on the spectrum? What's their IQ? Maybe they need to go into a different kind of school or whatever it might be. They might give them a testing battery, but then they don't even treat them. They would then pass them on to a counselor or social worker like me.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. That was such a little detour on the very beginning of our episode, but I couldn't help. I had to.
I wouldn't have known unless I went through the training myself. So.
I just wanted to get the lay of the land. Okay. I definitely have been, recently I've been trying to take a little page out of the Mel Robbins book and like not start looking on my Instagram or TikTok when I open my eyes. I'm like trying to like let there be a little beat. Update on that, not going well. I'm really in my habit of just like opening my eyes and wanting to check my phone. But it's like our TikTok algorithm and our Instagram algorithm, so strong. At least mine is like very full of mental health. It's giving boundaries. It's giving ADHD. It's giving narcissist. It's getting like cut off. It's giving no contact. It's giving all of these things. Are we in the middle of a mental health misinformation crisis?
I think we are. And the reason why I think we are is because it kind of feels like culture is a little bit how I was, and maybe some of my classmates were, like year one of grad school, where it's like you're learning about all these like frameworks and concepts, and we're all so excited. We want to talk about it all the time, but we have no idea what we're doing because we're not even allowed to like see a patient yet, you know? And so I think part of it is like normal as mental health has gotten destigmatized and there's been like this popularization. It does feel a little bit like we're all these like overeager like psych undergrads or first year grad students, but with it, you're not getting that specificity, you're not getting that nuance, and you're not able to necessarily apply it appropriately because unlike people who are in grad school, maybe you kind of do that surface level skim and then you just stop learning about it. And that's where that's the spirit through which I wrote this book and create a lot of my content, which is, well, could we bring it just a click deeper so we're not misusing these things?
Yes. Cause I mean, so you're not anti-therapy or anti-healing. It's actually the opposite.
Totally.
So what are you pushing back against in the book?
Yeah. Well, whenever people accuse like me or my content of being like, you know, not sensitive enough or anti-therapy or whatever it might be, the example I like to bring up is it's kind of like when someone criticizes America and then they're getting accused of being like anti-American, when you would think, well, maybe they actually love America so much that they actually want to have these conversations or like whatever it is. It's kind of like that.
Okay, babes, can we just take a moment to talk about how special our dogs are? My babies are not just pets. They're my family, which is exactly why I switched to Ollie. Ollie delivers fresh, protein-packed meals made with real, human-grade ingredients, backed by vet nutritionists and crafted with culinary experts. And let me tell you, even the pickiest eaters get excited at mealtime. My pups run like the bulls during Sierra when they hear that Ollie pouch open. Plus, the Ollie app offers on-demand health screenings so you can actually tap real experts for peace of mind. That's so iconic. And the difference, my dog is happier, healthier, and thriving. Head to ollie.com/better. Tell them all about your dog and use code BETTER to get 60% off your welcome kit when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a happiness guarantee on the first box. So if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/better and enter code BETTER to get 60% off your first box. I love your comparison that we're basically overeager undergrad students. It's like on my first day of hair school, when I saw my like kit that I got, I was ready to like bleach and tone anything that walked within like a 50-foot radius of me. I was going to take some purple eyeshadow and fucking put it all over your face.
Oh my gosh.
You know,
do you think I need that? Or
no.
Okay.
I still remember the Aveda color. It was called Vinca and it was so pretty. And I just wanted to like rub Vinca all over everybody's faces. But I didn't know what I was doing. So it's like, yes, fun new information, but we have to be careful about how we apply it because we really can. What do you think the danger is of being exposed to so much information around mental health at once, especially in this capitalistic hellscape where a lot of people can't get treatment or don't have access to treatment. So then you see something online where you're like, I have those 3 symptoms. I must be something.
Yeah. Well, 2 things come to mind. The first thing is, particularly on social media, it's not, the problem isn't even that the content is bad or so much of it is wrong. There's just so much of it. And it's like dopamine. And there's no what we would call like an integration period. So in therapy, you arrive at an insight, you have time to chew on it, you have time to practice shifting the behavior, you consider whether or not you actually want to. My experience of consuming mental health and related content on social media is just like, oh, that's so interesting, like save, share. But it's like, am I actually taking the time to actually like put any of these into practice or use these insights in an intentional way? Probably not, at least not me. And then the second thing is that a lot of times, because it's short form, you're kind of getting like the soundbite. And then when you turn around and try to apply it, it gets a little bit messy. So for an example, narcissism is a big topic on social media.
Every time I see a video about narcissism, I always watch it because I'm always really scared that I'm a fucking narcissist.
Right, totally. And you might have some traits of what we would call narcissism because it's on a spectrum.
I definitely, on that little thing, I was like narcissistic tendencies for sure. But I feel like I'm not a narcissist full on.
Right, totally. Well, I think the issue is that a lot of people that started putting the content out there went ahead and said, well, we're not talking about the personality disorder. We're just talking about this personality trait. This is something I talk about in the book, but if you're going to talk about it like a personality trait, we have to talk about it like dimensionally. Like it's not just this thing where it's like you're this evil, selfish psycho or you're not. Because a lot of the different symptoms of narcissism can show up in a really helpful way. So for an example, maybe your brain surgeon, right, is a little arrogant, you know, like maybe he feels a little superior. Now, I don't want him or them to or her to be overcompensating for like a lack of competency. But if you're gonna be cutting into my brain, I'm okay if you're a little bit superior. Like I actually want you to have that like belief in yourself.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Or a lot of people in media, like you and me, it's like, yeah, like liking attention, liking talking, liking being liked. That's not bad in itself. It is just one of the traits. So when I talk to a patient about diagnosis, I often explain to it, it's like, think about all the stars in the sky, and then all the different symptoms are the different stars, right? Now, something like you, I think mentioned like ADHD versus PTSD, right? Those both might have a shared trait, a shared star of sleep problems, let's say. But just that one symptom does not make it either of those things. You have to have the other constellation, the other clusters in the constellation. You know what I mean?
Yes. How do you define psychobabble, and why is psychobabble so tempting to believe? Because if I was believing the psychobabble that I saw on my TikTok right now, I feel like TikTok definitely told me I'm autistic.
Maybe. It tells me that I'm autistic sometimes too. Psychobabble, the way I define it and write about it in the book, is it's using psychological or mental health jargon as a way to make a point. And so sometimes, you know, like on my show, on my podcast, I'm using psychology to try to understand something in culture or politics. And that in itself is a form of psychobabble. It's psychobabble whether or not it is true, whatever point you're trying to make. The issue, I think, is that a lot of people tend to gravitate towards psychobabble when it comes to topics where we don't have that much control. So if you think about like, what do you see a lot on social media? You see a lot of relationship advice, a lot of maybe like financial advice, like, you know, success oriented advice. You see a lot of stuff with families. And these are all domains in our lives where we want to have more control than we do, but we just don't. I would love to have more control over my dating life. I don't have it any more than I already have it. Same with my family, right? Same with my work and my job and my success and career and everything. And so we gravitate, I think, towards psychology because we're hoping that it'll give us a little more control. It'll give us an answer.
More understanding.
Exactly. And there's a lot of great insights there. I'm not against using psychology. Obviously, it's my favorite subject. But I think that a lot of times there's a great temptation to kind of use that like appeal to authority in order to make your point, to shut down conversation, to convince yourself that what is happening is not supposed to be happening or whatever it might be.
Ooh, say more about that.
So for an example, in dating, and I do touch on this in the book, there's a difference between being avoidantly attached and avoiding intimacy with you, right? And so...
Wait, my husband's avoidantly attached. Say more.
Okay. So let's say you and I are dating, and let's say it's like 1 or 2 dates, and then I kind of start to back away a little bit. I think TikTok might have you analyze me and might have you view me. It's like, oh, well, Joe's just avoidantly attached.
Oh, but maybe you're just not that into me.
But what if I'm just not that into you?
Yeah.
Because I'm literally just, that's what backing away from someone in the early stages of dating is. I'm avoiding further intimacy with you. And that sucks. And we've all been on the receiving end of that.
Yeah.
But I actually think it's much more mentally healthy. It's much more helpful and accurate to name that for what it is instead of now you're analyzing me. You're trying to remember what I mentioned about my mom and dad.
Yeah, well, but Joe, if we were fucking dating and you backed away, I would hope that you would say like, you know, that was a nice 2 dates getting to know you, but I am not interested in pursuing this any further. I think, you know.
Oh my God. Well, I would never back away from you in our fictitious romance.
And if you did, you would at least be honest about it.
Of course. Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, I like that. Okay. So, but basically you're saying like, sometimes things just are a response to something. It's not a mental health diagnosis.
Totally. Well, I think about me when I was misusing the framework of attachment styles to maybe understand early stages of dating. I now know because I've treated different attachment styles. I've worked through like my own, closer to secure, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. This really comes up when you're actually already committed to the person.
Right.
You know, but all these people on social media are using it to understand like the first like 1 to 10 dates, like before you're even Facebook official, you know what I mean? And it's just actually not helpful. It's harder to do than it is to say, but the best thing to do in that situation is probably to feel the disappointment, you know, even feel the confusion if you were ghosted or whatever it might be, but then you got to move on. You got to move on to that. That's what dating is.
Yeah. Don't get stuck in the grief. That's so true.
And my fear is that sometimes the psychobabble, like with the avoidant attachment stuff, will keep people in like the analysis fixated, not moving on because they want to understand, but they're trying to understand it because they're trying to feel like they're in more control over the situation than they are.
I had this lady who I worked with at my very first salon. I loved her so much. And she had this thing with dating where she was like men and women. She didn't say people because it was like before non-binary like understanding, but I'll just give her gender inclusive language where she was saying like, you know, people are like tissue dispensers when it comes to a relationship. It's like if one doesn't work out, next. Like you just gotta like keep going until you find one that you like. But I do think that especially with dating, I think back on like my 20s and when I was single and feeling like, oh my God, I'm never going to have someone. I'm never going to find someone. What's wrong with me? Why doesn't someone want me? Why doesn't this past ex? It like, I just felt so hyper fixated on a relationship that now when like my husband is really pissed off at me for something, I'm like, God, I miss shitting with the door open. Like I miss, like, I didn't even know like what I had,
totally.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's like, just enjoy. I just feel like, especially in your 20s and when you're like, you know, learning who you are, it's like, we just get into such a comparison mindset. And it's like where you are in your life, try to enjoy where you are in your life because things will change and you will find someone who loves you or not. But either way, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, totally. You know, it's funny. So I'm single and actively dating right now. And I was just telling a friend who just got into a very serious relationship. I was like, I'm ready. Like, where is he? I'm tired, you know? And then their response was, if it makes you feel any better, because they're in it, like they're going to get engaged soon. Like I love them together. They're like, oh my gosh. They're like, I miss just being responsible for myself.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, like ordering dinner used to be so easy.
Totally.
Like
oh my
it's
gosh.
like such a fucking thing. And like, and I do love him and I am so happy, but like it is it's just like work.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just like work, but it just, like regulating yourself is hard, and then helping someone else regulate themselves is hard, especially if you do have ADHD and then you insist on adopting like 5 cats and 3 dogs. And like, so that's just like, we have a lot on our plate.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, over there.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the clinical term is interdependence. You don't want to be too independent.
Yes.
You don't want to be codependent.
Yes.
You want to be in the middle.
I do think we're interdependent. I love the interdependent term. That's our goal.
Me too.
I'm pretty sure I am anxiously attached and my husband is avoidantly attached, but we are in couples therapy.
Great.
And it does really help
Totally.
because we both kind of understand more of like what each other's triggers are.
Yeah.
I feel like, as I said earlier, my whole like waking up and not looking at social, not going well. My TikTok is full of, I've got no contact. You need to set a boundary. 3 signs that you are a narcissist. So I just think I want to break down some of what we're seeing on social media and why and how we can like arm ourselves with better information to navigate that. And maybe the answer is, and I do think that my TikTok, this is true, I need to just fully reset my algorithm from researching gay Republicans and like on this podcast 2 years ago. I just don't think it's ever recovered since then. And I do think I need a full algorithmic reset.
Yeah, you got to.
I need, I gotta like, just, it needs a good hair wash. But why do you think we become so obsessed with therapy speak, like gaslighting, trauma, and boundaries?
Yeah. I think that we've become so obsessed with it because it gives us insight or answers or a sense of control into just areas of life that we're not in control of. Like a lot of it is like relationship based, right? Or like friendship or your boss or your mom or your father-in-law or like whatever it might be. And something I say to my patients all the time is like, you're one half of your relationships. You're not 51%, you know, you're not 49. Like you are one half of it. And that can be difficult when other people are not showing up, you know, with their full 50%.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I do think that that's kind of where sometimes we're almost using the language, therapeutic language that we hear on social media to like absolve ourselves of responsibility for something.
Right.
That's what I see a lot. Does that resonate for you?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, one way I'm guilty of that personally is it's just kind of like, I don't want to go out. I don't want to go to the dinner. I'm like, you know, but I'm tired. I need to take care of my mental health. And it's like, or like I can down a coffee and like go to one of my dearest friends, like birthday celebration. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes,
like it's like, I don't own, or you just own the fact that it's like, hey, this actually isn't a priority to me. Like this relationship isn't as important maybe as
but
like
what if
you
it's
think
like,
it is.
Because I have this one really good friend who I did not go to their birthday, but I was going to. And like, I just was like, I think it can point to like that in your life generally, you are going too hard. Because if like, it's that there are points in my life where like I've committed to so much stuff that like it is someone who is a priority that I do love. And also I cannot show up there. Like I can't take 50 fucking selfies. I don't want to chat with people. Like I'm burnt the fuck out. I need to go home because if I do force myself to go out, I will fucking relapse and have a goddamn meltdown. So I just, sometimes I have to honor that. But then I try to communicate with that person and be like, I'm sorry I let you down. Like maybe I could take you to like a birthday brunch.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, of course. So here's how I think about how to use all these terms, no matter which ones you go over correctly. Have you ever heard the, it's like a conditional logic thing where it's like, if it's a dog, it's a mammal. But if it's a mammal, it's not necessarily a dog.
Yes.
Right. So apply that. And this is my advice to like anyone who's concerned that they're using psychobabble or like they're misusing a term. Think about this phrase. If it's a dog, it's a mammal. But if it's a mammal, it might not be a dog. So, you know, if it's a boundary, we can use this one as an example. If it's a boundary, right, then, you know, maybe it's, you know, because you're protecting your mental health because you can't go for XYZ, blah, blah, blah. But like, if you can't go for XYZ, blah, 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 that doesn't necessarily mean that you're like drawing a boundary. It might just be a preference, right? Another example could be if they're selfish. So if it's a narcissist, they're selfish, right? But just because they're being selfish doesn't make them a narcissist. There's lots of reasons why someone might be selfish.
Yes. Because like they're a platypus. They're not a fucking dog. But they're still a mammal.
Total. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They just lay eggs.
Those are technically mammals. Those are the exceptions. Yeah.
Yeah. Platypi.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's I've seen, like, not to name drop, but I've like seen them in real life.
No way.
Yeah. In Australia. I saw them. They was really cool. They weren't as big as I thought they were going to be. Kind of little, actually.
Yeah. Oh.
Little, like,
Wait, like how big?
Like little, like a, kind of like 2 bananas with a tail. Like not that, like I was imagining like a duck, like a big ass duck.
Yeah.
They're littler than a big ass duck, which I thought was interesting. Okay. How problematic is it to self-diagnose your own mental health, asking for a friend?
It depends on what you do with it. So people have written into me or commented, on my socials being like, well, I self-diagnosed and I fought for this diagnosis and then I was able to get the treatment I needed. I love that. That's great. If you need like a disability accommodation or you need a medication or you need like whatever it is, that's awesome, because what a diagnosis is it informs a treatment plan. Right? I don't actually always diagnose the people in my practice, just because it won't necessarily inform the kind of work we're doing. We're not accepting insurance. We don't need to bill anyone. So who cares? Let's not even put a clinical label on it. Right? But if what you need is you need some sort of accommodations at school or at work, right? Or there's something like disability related, or you need a medication, then you have to have that diagnosis. What I see a lot on social media is people are saying like, well, therapy is expensive, the waiting list is too long, but I have these symptoms and therefore like this is my diagnosis, I claim it. But then they don't take it a step further. They don't try to get better. They don't necessarily learn like how to, like, so for example, if you have ADHD or autism, there are executive functioning skills you can learn. There are different things that you can kind of practice in terms of how you organize your space at home or at work to get better. And a lot of times people aren't really doing that. It's more like, well, this is my identity, this is my personality, but I'm not going to actually do anything with this information.
So I can be like a snappy asshole because I have ADHD.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I can just be late all the time and it's not my fault. Yeah.
Okay. So I do really struggle with that and I feel personally attacked.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I like the on time thing is like a huge fucking area of opportunity. In fact, you are like the second guest in 3 months who I have beat here.
Oh my God, no way.
And it's only because I literally just moved like 5 blocks away
from
where we record.
Oh my gosh.
Like time management is like a huge area of opportunity for me where like my brain literally melts fucking down.
Yeah.
Like if I have to leave my house in 20 minutes, I will like get compulsive about like, oh, well, this is the time where I have to tweeze my brows. And if I don't stop like if I stop tweezing my brows right now, like I fucking melt down. Like I freak out. Like I'm like, the makeup's not gonna work.
Yeah, totally. Well, maybe you beat me here because I have ADHD. I talk about this on my platform. And one of the ways I deal with the temporal distortion that you're talking about.
Is that what that's called?
That's what, that's
like
the
when you just cannot
term.
manage your fucking time.
Yeah. The way I deal with it is I basically tell myself it's gonna take about twice as long as I think. Because sometimes in my head, I'm like, oh, I only need 10 minutes to get ready. No, I don't.
Oh, no, I need an hour and a half.
No, totally. It's like, I need like a lot more time. And so like, I think that's really helped. It is worth noting though, that even though there's some studies, and it's certainly on social media that people with ADHD struggle with this, it's not a formal symptom.
The time thing,
right? They think it could be what underpins like the missing the deadlines and like forgetting to pay bills and like all of that sort of thing.
Ever since I'm a business manager, I'm really good about that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, because I don't pay them anymore. Someone else does it. Yeah.
Totally. But and here's the thing about that though. Maybe the criteria will evolve for the diagnosis, and maybe it needs to. Maybe we actually need to include this time thing in there. But right now it's not. And so what that means is you have like research going in one direction, and then like social media and mental health culture and op-eds and opinion pieces and going in this other direction. And now there's going to be this divide, right? Or there currently is one, I would argue, for a whole bunch of different things.
Or like, is time included in like the ADHD like
Totally. But that's not good. So another example where this comes up is this idea of like trigger warnings. So a trigger, like a PTSD trigger, this was initially formulated for people with PTSD or like an eating disorder. Like if they were on the internet and saw, the image of someone really skinny or something like that, it could really like trigger them into some sort of an episode. This was very important. But then now it's kind of become like, oh, well, if I'm feeling emotionally uncomfortable, if I'm feeling emotionally activated or stressed, this counts as a trigger. They've done these studies on trigger warnings in which they have found that they're actually not effective. They actually can make things worse. But
in what way?
Well, so they found that it increases anxiety before you read the book, watch the movie, have the class discussion. But then some studies have suggested that it actually increases, because it kind of sets you up to be triggered. It then actually increases the emotional impact of the trigger. So it actually makes it worse than it would have been. But here's the kicker. I read this meta-analysis and then I went and looked at all the other studies within the meta-analysis, and none of them differentiate. Is this like a formal trigger, like for PTSD and eating disorders, or is this like, I feel emotionally uncomfortable? Those are completely two different things. And so now this study, we don't even know if it's accurate, and that's where the psychobabble isn't just like kind of cringe and kind of annoying, it has consequences.
You write about the myth that, quote, everyone needs therapy. Why is that belief not always helpful? And also, I'm not going to name drop this person. Okay, fine, it was Emma Raducanu.
Okay.
But Emma Raducanu literally just did this interview where she was like, I don't need therapy. Like, I did it twice. It wasn't for me. I'm not going back. And whenever people say stuff like that, in my mind, I'm always like, okay, fucking psycho. Like, there's definitely something going on there. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, or some people just like, fucking, they're just fine. Like they just don't need therapy. Like maybe they just don't have big T trauma.
Well, what I talk about in the book is, while everyone could certainly hope to benefit from therapy, assuming the therapist is a good fit and competent and everything, not everyone needs it. And I talk about how, I've had a certain type of patient who comes in and, they learn about themselves. They, self-actualize a little bit more. They're less self-conscious. They're more integrated with their personality, and they're great. And I send them on their way. Did they need it? Especially compared to some of my patients who come in and, in the most compassionate way, like they are meeting the criteria of several different mental disorders. Like there's a lot happening. Their lives are in all sorts of dysfunction. I think they needed it. And if it wasn't with me, I hope they would have it with somebody else. There's also this, what do you think about this? There's also, because I don't write about this in the book, but I've thought about it a lot. There's this issue of like supply and demand and social justice. There's something like 300 million people in the US. I've looked up the different estimates. There's no more than like 500, maybe 700,000 therapists, but a lot of estimates actually bring it down to like more like a few 100,000. And so if every therapist has seen 40 patients a week, I see 10, by the way. And so most is lower than that. That leaves tens of millions of people without care. And that's if we only stick with the NAMI, like the National Alliance Against Mental Illness. They, before the pandemic, their estimates were 1 in 4 people had a diagnosable condition. So for me, I'm very interested in, like, I'm very pro coach, like I'm very pro other types of support, just because societally, like, I don't know how we're going to meet the demand if everybody needs it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so maybe, certainly we need more therapists and more people kind of working in the field. But I'm all of the above. I'm like, yeah, like let's get technology involved. Let's get the coaches involved. Like we need an all hands on deck here.
So what do you think? I mean, we see so much music around like, my ex was a psychopath. My ex is a narcissist. And we also just see this just in like regular chat on social media. Also a lot around emotional abuse. Like that was emotionally abusive.
Right.
And like, what's the consequence of labeling people things that like maybe you don't even understand what you're labeling them as?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. I think that number one, you might unfairly tarnish somebody's reputation when the truth of the matter is breakups are hard. And something I read about in the book is that there's kind of 2 ways we cope with stress, broadly speaking. It's called an insecure coping style, a grandiose coping style. So insecure coping style is, let's say, like, not that we would ever break up if we were imaginarily together, but if we did, right, maybe I get kind of stressed. And if I have an insecure coping style, it might be like, poor me, like I'm never going to meet anyone, like I fucked up, like JVN's the best, like how could I mess this up? Like, and that's all kind of like inwardly focused. But then the grandiose coping style is one where I'm just like, well, screw that guy. Does he not realize like how lucky he was and they did it? And it's more kind of like outward, more like angry.
Yeah.
Both are very, very normal. The latter, grandiosity, is a symptom of narcissism, but in the chaos of a breakup, it's also pretty normal to feel like that. Like I know I've had that thought about exes or with people it didn't work out. I think everyone listening or watching this has. And so if that gets communicated to the person you're breaking up with, I understand how it would be so tempting to be like, wow, like how selfish, how narcissistic of them. You know, they really like didn't consider me or whatever it might be. And so I think that we have to, particularly when it comes to relationships and dating, just give everyone and ourselves like a little bit of grace. And acknowledge that, yeah, there are some people that are narcissistic out there. In my experience dealing with narcissists, they're not people whose attention you want to attract. Most people are just like happy to get away and to heal, you know, and it's not kind of like this tirade against their reputation. And in fact, if you do believe that your ex or someone you're close with has narcissistic personality disorder, my genuine advice would be to proceed sharing that information about them with caution. Because if it gets back to them and they genuinely are that symptom cluster, it can get really nasty and really scary.
Been there.
Yeah.
So what can you define, like, what is a narcissist?
Yeah. So a narcissist, if we're thinking about just the formal definition of the personality disorder, they're very superior. They're very grandiose. They often have a very, what we would call a shallow affect. So their emotional resonance isn't very deep. right? Usually very charming, very likable. They need to be admired. And the need versus the want is really important here. So if you think about like a Venn diagram, like I like admiration. Like I think most people like admiration, but if I don't get it, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right. Someone that's very narcissistic, if they don't get it, like that's when you see them start to act out. They seek it, by any means necessary. They'll kind of like mow over people, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you're in a room with a lot of ambitious, or a lot of very like successful people, there might be some normative levels of trait narcissism there. But when does it become disordered? When does it become a problem? Well, if I'm not number one, if the spotlight isn't on me, then I'm going to flip over this table. I'm going to sabotage this.
Like, just like, I feel like I've witnessed that, but I didn't like distance. Because I didn't realize that like I might get caught up in like an F5 tornado in there.
Right, exactly.
I might be like, what was the name of the like the tornado like thing that they were trying to get? Dorothy. Wasn't it Dorothy? Like the machine's name was Dorothy.
Yeah.
Girl, I was Dorothy. I was getting left on the fucking side of the road.
Oh my gosh.
I was just fucking Twister. We got fucking cows. My little balls were fucking smashed up, and I got sucked all the way up into the Twister, and I didn't even get spit out cue.
Totally.
Like I didn't even get my metadata.
Oh my God.
Like they just like fucking rampaged me all the fuck around. Okay, so narcissist. What about how does saying that everyone has trauma actually minimize the meaning of that word?
So it's super confusing, right? Because not that many decades ago, the idea of PTSD was presented to the Veteran Affairs Association or like administration, right? Like in the federal government. And they thought it was like a quacky idea. They were like, that's not happening to soldiers coming back. And so to see how far the pendulum has swung, where now it's kind of like, wait, but doesn't everybody have like some sort of trauma? It didn't just happen overnight. We accepted PTSD. And then we accepted that you could have legitimate trauma without meeting the full criteria. And then we kind of started getting into like big T traumas where it's like you're in a car accident or an assault or something, versus like little T traumas, like, your pet died, or, you had a public speaking experience that didn't go that well or something like that. I think that anything can be a potentially traumatic experience, but trauma is about your relationship to the past in this present moment. It's actually not about what happened to you. Because two people, we've done the studies, two people get into the same car accident, they were in the same car, right? One has PTSD and one doesn't.
Right.
Two people grow up in the same home, right? Go through the same sort of stuff. One has all these problems, one doesn't. I think that we need to differentiate trauma from like non-trauma tragedy for a couple of different reasons. The main one that I think about is, and I read about this in my book, I lost my dad when I was 11. Unexpectedly, definitely developed trauma responses from that. But there's also this idea of like grief. I had a family member, it was like a year or two ago. Well, it was while I was writing the book. They're fine now, but they had a health scare. And so obviously you can imagine, after losing my dad, my family were a little sensitive to people in the family like getting sick or like something happening. And so of course, like all this stuff comes up. But as I reflect on that experience, as I talked to my therapist at the time about it, it wasn't a trauma response. It was our grief coming up again. And I remember he said something very interesting. He goes, Joe, what a blessing to have this like grief come up again so you can like feel it and process it. That was very annoying to hear at the time, of course, because I'm like dysregulated and upset. I can't think of an instance where, someone's trauma gets re-triggered after years of them being fine and me being like, what a gift your trauma is triggered. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And so I think that a lot of bad things can happen to us and even affect us, but they don't wound us. That's where the word trauma comes from, in that like wounded way where you probably do need some sort of clinical attention. And if you do have that, whether it's from big T or little t, I think the good news is like we can treat it. Like we're getting pretty good like at treating trauma.
You say that mindfulness is not for everyone. Why not?
Yeah. So mindfulness is a wonderful tool. I have a mindfulness practice, and I think it is good for the typical person that's concerned about their mental like wellness and emotional dexterity. I think it's great. But when it comes to mental health, it's not necessarily the right tool for every person, and it's not necessarily the right tool for every situation. In the book, I talk about a patient I had early in my grad school practicum or internship where I facilitated this meditation. And, I was like really nailing it. I had like the right voice with it, and I watched them, they get so still in their body. They had a full-blown panic attack in front of me in the office. Why? Because their baseline level, their body was in this constant state of fight and flight, self-hatred. stress, they actually didn't have the tools yet to handle any of that. And so I put the cart before the horse. I was like, okay, well, let's get really still and just feel our emotions without judging them. They weren't in a place to be able to do that. And so that's when I learned, okay, there's actually something that needs to happen before that. We need some distress tolerance skills. We need some emotional regulation skills. And then we can incorporate mindfulness. Another example might be someone who's experiencing.
Oh, we just gotta go back a little bit.
Yeah.
So what are those skills? Like if you're like, okay, like mindfulness, like we're not ready there yet. Like you're like, you can't sit with those feelings yet.
Right.
What were those like stress management, like exercises?
Sure. So are you familiar with DBT, like dialectical behavioral therapy?
I've heard of it. Tell me again.
Yeah. So mindfulness is one of the pillars of DBT, but then there's this other pillar of DBT called distress tolerance. When you're learning distress tolerance skills, sometimes people hear it's like, oh, well, I won't have any distress anymore. That's not what it means. It means you're going to be able to experience more distress without letting it like affect you. And so what the skills often are is it can be something as minor as like, oh, well, if I'm feeling stressed, let's engage my five senses. So let's make a cup of tea. We're going to feel the warm tea in our hands. You know, like we'll use this mug as an example. We're going to smell the tea. We're going to taste the tea. We're going to listen to some nice music.
And isn't that mindfulness?
It is in the sense that you may want to be very present and non-judgmental of an experience. But if you're doing that because you are feeling stressed and you don't want to engage in a behavior out of that stress that will probably make your stress worse, like raising your voice at a coworker or picking a fight with your partner, it's not exactly mindfulness. You're actually almost distracting yourself from the feeling and letting it pass. Now, that's a very minor example of engaging the five senses. For some patients, their distress is so much higher that if I told them to make a cup of tea, they would laugh at my face. And
they're like, I'm going to throw the fucking cup of tea in your face.
Totally. So then if that's the level you're at, what I would say, okay, I need you to take an ice cold shower. I need you to bite into a lemon or an onion, like something very strong.
Like bring you out of this.
And pungent. Exactly. And so you're still using the five senses. And I guess you are in a certain way being mindful of them. But in mindfulness, it's much more about just kind of like, feeling the things and like not making them right or wrong. There's sometimes you want to make your feelings wrong in the sense that it's like, well, I don't want to act on this one in this way. It's perfectly valid what you're feeling and you got to let it pass. I don't want you to suppress it, but maybe not act on it. Maybe not engage in any behaviors because of it.
Right. That makes, that resonates.
Well, the only person that gets to act on every feeling that they have is like a little kid, you know, and that's how you raise a little kid. You're like, don't do that.
Boundaries. What are boundaries and how are they being misunderstood?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think of boundaries, they're like preferences. I like to think of them, I actually just saw this on social media the other day, and this is why sometimes there's like great stuff on there. That's why it's so addicting. And I wish I included it in the book, but I can't. So I'll tell you all now. It was basically this idea of like a traffic camera where it's kind of like, so if you're a traffic light, you know, when it goes to yellow, you slow down. When it goes to red, you stop. And if you speed through, it's like, I will take your picture and send you the ticket, right? Now, the first time that happens to the person that ignores the boundary, right? The boundary being like the metaphor of the boundary being the red light, right? You might be upset about it, but it's not personal. It's just, this is the consequence of what's going to happen, right? When you cross it. Have you ever had on the show, or you ever follow like Dr. Becky Goodsdale, I think is her last name?
Tell me more.
She's great. And she's like a parenting expert. And I really like her content a lot. And she talks about, you know, you bring your little kid in the elevator and they push all the buttons and you're mortified and you're a parent and you say like, don't do that, right? This is like, I'm setting a boundary. Don't do that. You're not setting a boundary. It's a preference. The boundary is, if you do that, you don't get dessert. And you're like, this is just what's going to happen. So you and me, we're friends, we're hanging out. Maybe one of my boundaries is you're kind to me, right? It's one of my things. And if you're not, right, I'm not gonna hang out with you as much. Right?
So then so here's my question about boundaries. So then if someone's like crossed our boundary, do we tell them or do we just back away slowly?
Yeah. I think it depends on the severity of the transgression, but I think you tell them. The tricky thing about boundaries is, so like the preference is what needs to be communicated, right? The boundary might get negotiated a little bit, either explicitly or implicitly, just like through their behavior. They might kind of see and like test a little bit. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, assuming it's with like good faith and good intention. However, if it's something that's a real hard line for you and you've communicated it pretty explicitly, I think it's okay to start to enforce it implicitly. Where that gets tricky though is, what if it's like a family member or an in-law, right? Then you have to kind of it's not just about like no contact. It's kind of like, oh, and now when we're at the family gathering, it's like, I'm not going to just like say hello to you in more than a couple seconds. I'm going to walk away each time, you know, until until the moment where you start to respect the boundary.
Yeah. Or until you can like take responsibility for the harm you caused, and then maybe we can start over.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Absolutely.
So algorithmically, if you're just like, how do you recommend that people filter their mental health content that they consume online?
Well, what I would do, and what I do actually, is I'll actually just take the link and like send it to my therapist and be like, this is the one I want to talk about, you know, or you could like send it to like friends or a partner, whoever you talk about, you know, serious and deep things with, and just actually make it a point to actually dive into it more deeply, right? I think that's number one, because it's so much dopamine. And the issue, my biggest issue isn't even all the misinformation. It's all too good information. You know what I mean? Like you can't absorb, I certainly can't.
Yeah.
And I'm on that thing like all day long, you know? And so I think that that's number one. And then number two, I keep bringing it up, but I think it's so important. If it's a dog, it's a mammal, but if it's a mammal, it's not a dog. Just using that, no matter what the subject, but particularly mental health, is going to be really, really helpful for you not misapplying and misunderstanding.
Let's do it with
so much
dopamine
of it.
addiction really quick.
Okay.
So dopamine addiction, I saw this thing on TikTok and it was like when I was little, I had these like stations in my basement. It would be like watching VHS tapes of figure skating, go upstairs, get my powdered donuts, go out on the trampoline, pretend I was a gymnast, stick a couple things, win a couple of imaginary Olympics, go back downstairs, turn the VH, and I had my little like stations. Am I a dopamine addict?
Yeah. So again,
yes.
So if the symptom of the dopamine addiction is what in this instance, like you can't stay focused?
No, it's like that you just like have like little like stations that you like go around to. And I was like, I totally did that.
Okay, great. So the way you think about it then is, if I am a dopamine addict, maybe I have little stations that I rotate around to for stimulation. But just because I have stations that I rotate around to for stimulation doesn't make me a dopamine addict, right? Not necessarily. It just depends on how it's being used and if there are other symptoms or signs of dopamine addiction present.
What are the other signs about that one again? Not to like ask for another DSM.
No, it's okay. Well, it's an emergent concept. Like Anne Lemke at Stanford works on this. Like her book Dopamine Nation is really great. And so I think we're still kind of figuring out exactly what it looks like. I think that for me, just based on what I know about it, if you're going to all the different stations, but you're actually just like not like feeling like it's almost like you're chasing a drug, right? You're like, I want to get high. Like I want to feel it, but I can't. And so I go from the TV to the phone to this, and it all feels just like flat, right? Oh no, we'll talk off camera.
It's giving like when I go to buy jewelry, when I go to buy a bag, when I go to like, and then I'm like, oh, why do I do this? I didn't even like, it doesn't even like give me the hit. Like
totally. But the great news about
unless it was this ring.
Oh,
this ring did really give me the hit.
Yeah.
Rainbow Moonstone.
Oh,
cunty, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But I also think that that's also just like, that's a cultural thing that we're all going through right now, because there is so much dopamine, there is so much convenience, there is so much indulgence. And so then that kind of brings us to this whole other question where it's like, well, like just because it's normal, right? Does that make it healthy? You know what I mean? Just because everyone's doing it. I would argue no, not necessarily.
You include patient stories and real research in your book. What's one example of a client who had to unlearn one of these myths?
I had a patient who came in on the autism spectrum, fully convinced they had something called RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria. The internet would have you believe that neurodivergent people really deal with this and it's hardwired. And I was just like, listen, maybe it's hardwired, maybe it's not. I would like to treat it as if it's not. This has happened a few times. Anecdotally, I have a 100% success rate of correcting it. And so I'm not sure it's as hardwired as people on social media would have you think.
What do you say to someone who's scared to let go of their self-diagnosis because it gave them a sense of identity or community?
I'm not a religious person, but I do believe that little voice in your head that says, if you're happy, if you're mentally healthy, you won't be able to be creative or successful. I think that is proof of the devil, that little whisper, because what a horrible myth to believe that if I get better, if I use this diagnosis and actually like grow out of it and like no longer meet the criteria, I won't have a sense of purpose, of identity or community. Like what a horrible myth to be telling yourself and people. There are other people up here on the healed mountaintop. You don't have to just be trekking up it with others to have a meaningful life.
If someone wants to start making sense of their mental health without the psychobabble, what's the first step?
The first step is, if you can use other language to describe it, use that language. If you're reaching out to a therapist and you're like, I think my ex was a narcissist, is that helpful? Or is it better to say, they're selfish. They never took any accountability, because the truth is the conversation is going to go there anyways. And when you get hung up on all the psychobabble speak, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not, but it's not necessarily going to bring you to the conversation faster.
It's time for our final segment, which is French Kitty Corner. We're going
to,
these are listener questions that we submitted. There is a lot, and we had a lot of really good ones. And stick around, you guys, because our Patreon is getting so good, so much fun on our Patreon, which you can subscribe to anytime you want. And we're going to have Joe for a few more, like probably 10, 15 more minutes after this to get more listener questions on the Patreon. So if you want to do that, we're having so much fun over there. It's really giving like the wild, wild west for me on my Patreon. It's like before the internet stopped being fun. I'm just having so much fun over there.
Great.
But let's do our French Kitty Corner question.
Okay. Wow. My heart is pounding.
Their name is Jacqueline. They were born Jacques, but they're trans.
Okay.
Yeah. I just said that to make conservatives mad, but I'm sure they wouldn't be listening to like the 50th minute of my podcast anyway. Okay. Is saying I need to protect my peace a healthy boundary or a way to avoid accountability?
Interesting. It's a little difficult to answer without more context, so I'll just answer with two different examples. I think that it can be healthy if, kind of like you mentioned earlier, it's like if I'm on the verge of burnout, right? Or if me showing up is I'm actually going to like detract from your celebration or this event, like more than I'm going to be able to give to it. I totally understand that. But I also think that in another example, if people are over relying on it or relying on it because there's actually something else going on, maybe it's not what's needed. I could easily see it being used as an excuse to be selfish while using psychobabble to avoid taking accountability.
Joe Nucci, thank you so much for coming on Getting Better. We adore you so much. Your new book, it's out now, Psychobabble. Get it wherever you get your books. Did you do the audiobook too?
I did.
You guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.